I'm a god.
Well, what if there is no tomorrow?
I'm a god.
There wasn't one today.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of It's Time to Rewind, a podcast stuck in its own time loop right along with the movies we discuss. In this season, we're taking a look at Groundhog Day, after day, after day, after day, after day. I'm your host, Bubbawheat from Flights, Tights, and Movie Nights, and in this episode, we're discussing Phil's 35th Groundhog Day that starts at 82 minutes, with Phil giving a thoughtful and engaging Groundhog's Day report, and ends at 84 minutes and 48 seconds, with Phil walking off with Rita into the snow. Today, my guest is Jay Cluitt, host of the Deep Blue Sea podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm good, thank you, Bubbawheat. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, it's good to have you. So, let's go ahead and jump right into it.
Yes, there's a lot to talk about today.
Yes, it's been a long time since I've had a really long loop to dig into, and this is actually the longest. It's like 13 minutes.
I'm honoured to have given so much to talk about.
And this is not to spoil things, but this is Phil's final Groundhog Day.
It is. Yes, this is momentous. All these previous guests, they've had nothing. They're just filler episodes in the middle. I got the end of the sandwich, the last piece of the cake. It's great. I know you got more shows to do. There's a tomorrow, but this is the important one. This is something changes in this day. Yes. Something happens. I don't know what it is. It's never confirmed, but something. Yes, within these almost 30 minutes, something has happened.
And I do want to dig into that, but I'm going to wait till the end whenever we actually get to that. But here at the beginning, we see, Phil has perfected this Groundhog's Day speech, and he brings up Chekhov's Long Winter. And this comes from the writing of Anton Chekhov, which, he's a Russian playwright who lived in the late 1800s. I don't suppose you're familiar with any of Chekhov's plays or short stories?
Not in the slightest. I've only recently become familiar with Chekhov in Star Trek. So, Chekhov beyond that, no. Very, very much no.
Yeah, and as far as I know, his works haven't really gone on to anything great, but he is very well known, and especially I think what he's most well known for, especially in the movie critic circles that we run in, is he is the one who coined he's the one who originated the concept of Chekhov's gun.
Yes.
And it's advice that he gave at various points in his life. So there are some slight variations, but the most concise is, if there's a gun hanging on the wall in the first act, it should go off in the third. And I think that this day is more or less, you could stretch the argument at the point, but this day is filled with Chekhov's guns.
It's just a series of guns firing for 12 and a half minutes.
Yes,
basically. Yes, I completely agree.
It's like every single side character that's had more than a couple lines of dialogue, and even I think one or two that have had 0 lines of dialogue at this point, but have shown up in the background, gets their moment in the sun.
There are some notable ones who don't appear. Like I think Mrs. Lancaster, I didn't spot her in this whole sequence, and Porkchop, the guy from the B&B, he doesn't show up, and neither do Ralph and Gus, unless they're in the background of the party somewhere.
Yeah.
But those were I was searching for them the whole time, and I couldn't spot them. I found it was odd that some of these people have had quite a big presence in some of the previous loops, and yet here they didn't come to the party. Ralph and Gus are still drinking at the bowling alley somewhere. Mrs. Lancaster is presumably doing something at the B&B. Maybe the guy at the B&B didn't stay the night, or he got out before the blizzard. I don't know, but they're not here, and I missed them. But we have so much else. We have Michael Shannon.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on for the Michael Shannon. I know he cropped up in one of the earlier ones. But
yeah.
This is the WrestleMania. This is the Michael Shannon one.
Yeah, and they have, I think, the best scene in this movie, or in this day. Just there's so much going on, and sometimes I like to jump around, but there's just so much going on in this one that I think it'll be better for us to go in order. So we'll save that for just a little bit.
Yes.
But here in Phil's Groundhog's Day report, I think that it's interesting that, immediately Rita is acting. I feel like she's acting like she has this schoolgirl crush on Phil out of nowhere after hearing just this single speech. And this is the first time that Rita actually asks Phil to go out for coffee instead of the other way around.
Yes, and he turns her down. So actually, I want to cut to like before this loop starts, where we don't see. I know that you have a series of like key points that happen throughout the day, and we've already skipped a couple of them. We don't have the alarm clock. We don't have him encountering Portman on the stairs or meeting. I apologize for calling him Portman. That's the only name he's given in the film. So if it helps listeners, I'm a bigger guy myself. He doesn't interact with Mrs. Lancaster at all at breakfast. So we don't see when Phil met Larry and Rita this morning. So yes, we're seeing Rita's reaction to like she's almost got a schoolgirl crush on him through the broadcast that he's doing. But what did he do before then? He's convinced the entire town to. Lots of them have their own reporters to not report on, not video their own reporters, but to show him and put their microphones towards him and him do everyone's broadcast for them instead of just his own. So he's shown some kind of leadership skills there. He's presumably spoken to Buster and got the better location again. So he's coming in full like alpha Phil to this morning and he's controlling everything, but in a nice guy manner. So. Yes, it's a fantastic report. He's perfected the report, as you say. But there's more to this scene than we're seeing, and that could have added to Rita's crush.
I always got the impression that he didn't set all of this up beforehand. Like I do think that he talked to the inner circle, as they're called, the people running the Groundhog's Day event. I believe that he talked to them and helped set up with them. He got a good spot. But I think he just started into his broadcast, and then as he started going, he got the attention of everybody else, and it's like one of those slow builds. Like as his speech started going, it just like 10 minutes into it, everybody is suddenly focused on what he has to say, and then we're seeing the end result of that.
But so there's at least 3 other microphones from other reporters pointed towards him. And I'm just picturing the people holding those microphones being the reporter for that news outlet. And them mid-report, hearing just off earshot Phil's report, thinking, that's so much better. Cameraman, go left, pan left. And then just...
Yeah, exactly.
That would be incredible. Why can't we see that?
Well, I think... Personally, I think that, maybe Mark Rubin didn't have enough confidence to think that he could do the entire speech well enough. And also, this is a very... I've said it before, but this film in general is extremely efficient in storytelling, where it shows the audience just enough so that our mind fills in the blanks. And I think this is another great example of that we see exactly what we need to see for our mind to fill in the rest of it.
Yeah, like to cut ahead a little bit, we see Phil having some piano lessons. We never see him learn the Heimlich maneuver.
Right.
Like we don't need to have that. He may have known it beforehand, but also he may have heard that it would be required. We'll get there. It's fine. We'll get there.
Yeah, and then...
I don't want to jump ahead.
And then the next thing, his first errand that we see is him catching the kid in the tree.
Yes, this is like the line "You have never thanked me" is something I use often with my dogs. Whenever my dogs get like a twig stuck in their paw and they're like limping on a walk, and I'll go down, pick it out, and they just run off like, "You've never thanked." Obviously, they're dogs, but that's a line that's always stuck with me. I love this film. We'll get there at some point, but this is one of my favorite films, so I'm very happy to be here to talk about it today. This is a highlight of my day.
And I do love the fact that most people don't notice this. But the kid does show up 2 loops ago. You see him in the hospital in a wheelchair with a cast on his leg.
I hadn't spotted that, so that's good. So yeah, I figured that's how Phil would come about these errands. He would just go to the hospital at the end of the day, find out who was injured at some point during the day. Like, okay, so this kid's got a broken leg. He fell out of a tree. Whereabouts was that tree? Who's this kid? Tomorrow I'll see what I can do. And then he heard about, there's Buster Green. He choked to death. So where did that happen? Okay, let's see what I can do there.
Yeah, and the other thing that I love about this interaction is whenever Phil's like, maybe I'll save you tomorrow, maybe, and that shows that this isn't a completely different person. This is still Phil. He still has Phil's sense of humor. He's just better Phil.
Yeah, when he calls the kid a little brat. So yeah, he still has that Phil touch to him. But if we debate that this is the perfect day, if that's what the reasoning is that Phil gets to move on, then the perfect, I don't know if I fully believe that theory or not. If this is the perfect day, then that perfect day involves Phil calling the kid a brat and saying he might not save him tomorrow. So he doesn't have to be the epitome of perfection, Phil Collins. He just needs to be. He just needs to save the kid. Beyond that point, it's fine.
Yeah, he just needs to be the best Phil that he can be, and at the heart of Phil is still he has a sarcastic sense of humor. Like he says that he calls the kid names, but he does it in a very lighthearted, friendly. Like he's joking with love.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and if he didn't say a snarky comment, then his entire personality would have changed. And we don't want that. It's Bill Murray. It's a comedian. It's supposed to be funny.
Yeah, and then the next errand, I think this is the one that I do have a little bit of problem with. This is where the 3 old women get a flat tire in their Dodge Dart, and then he just shows up with a jack and a spare tire out of nowhere.
Yeah, we had the tire and the jack. I do enjoy that he doesn't introduce himself to them. He just starts changing. Because I feel like on some days he has knocked on the window and goes, excuse me, ladies, I happen to see you got a flat tire. I'm just going to change it. And then knowing the nature of the passengers of the car, that's led to a 45-minute long conversation that's delayed his entire day, and he's missed the next 2 or 3 errands. So he knows the only way to get through this and then get to whatever's next on the list is to just get in there, change the tire, and then run away.
Yes.
Just needs to get out of there.
Because he has a super tight timetable in order to get all of this stuff done in the span of 12 hours.
Exactly.
Because the Groundhog's Day event is 7 a.m. And then the Groundhog's Day dinner is at 6 p.m. So he's got 7 to 6 to get all this stuff done.
The Groundhog Festival Banquet.
Yeah.
I believe is the full title.
And this idea that he's changing a flat tire. Yes, it's a good deed, but a flat tire is an extremely minimal inconvenience, especially considering that they're going to be at the banquet at the end of the day anyways. So, what is he saving them from?
My only, let's see. Well, how would he have heard about that? He would have heard about the flat tire. Maybe he overhears a conversation between these ladies later on saying, "Oh, we had a flat tire. That meant we missed such and such an appointment, or we didn't get to the pharmacy before it closed, so we didn't get the medication, and now Edith's dead." Just to try and heighten the stakes a little bit for him to have picked this as one of the, or it could be a very minor. It is a very minor errand, but perhaps there is nothing else happening at this point in time that he could be fixing or could be improving. This is the most severe thing happening right now is there's a flat tire. He can change it. It's that, or just sit down and read a book for a little bit, and he may as well change the tire. And
then the other thing about this is we've never seen these old ladies before.
No.
They just come out of nowhere.
Yeah, well, I mean, you say we see the kid at the hospital, but that's a very, very briefly. So he's not been a massive part of this. Only, I think, of the errands he runs, only Buster has played a decent sized role in the film before now. So I do
think, and speaking of Buster, I do think it's interesting too that whenever Phil walks away, Buster says, "Who was that?"
It's your brother. You should recognize it.
And not only that, but he was standing right behind him
Yes,
giving
true.
his speech in the morning.
You applauded him not 3 hours ago. Well, 5 hours ago. It's lunchtime.
So I just think that is so bizarre that, I mean, I guess you can forgive him because, he was mostly behind him. Like, he didn't, come up and introduce himself. So he just, he's choking and
Yes.
then...
And he almost died. So
Yeah. So maybe he was like close to blacking out, and then by the time he turns around to look at Phil, he's already turned around lighting the woman's cigarette. So he only sees the back of his head.
That is such a smooth cap to the scene. It's just to light the cigarette, walk away. I don't. Again, you want to talk about how the severity of things that need fixing. This woman can't find her lighter. he's saving her 5 to 10 seconds of handbag searching, and he's just, no, I got it, I'm here. Just that little cherry on top of the cake of things that he can do to improve. And again, is it really improving the day that he's lighting someone's cigarette? People knew cigarettes were bad for you in the 90s. I remember. It's this. He should be taking that cigarette and crushing it underfoot and then storming out. If you ask me, I'm not a smoker.
Yeah, neither am I. And I do want to point out, jumping back just a tiny bit, but like, and whenever Buster's choking, his wife says, "Call 411, a doctor, a lawyer, anything." And I feel like, just from that sentence, I get a very prototypical Karen vibe from her.
Oh, yeah,
I think if
a lawyer, very much so.
And I think that
sue the restaurant for
exactly
tough steak.
Like, I need to speak to the manager. Like, we don't see it, but I don't think that she was very friendly with that restaurant after Phil left.
Probably so, yes. And given that she is the wife of one of the inner circle, that's going to give her a status of privilege.
Yeah.
Of
Do you know
who
who my husband is?
Exactly. Yes, I believe that's completely correct. I'm maybe that's why. Well, I mean, yes, Phil potentially saved Buster's life here, but makes it extra better of a deed that he's prevented the Karening of this restaurant. But like,
and I do love that she's wearing a sweatshirt that says "Faithful Follower, Punxsutawney Phil" on it.
I couldn't make out what it said, so that's, yes, wonderful. I hope she just wears that today and not every other day of the year. That's just a February 2nd day, hopefully.
I mean, her husband is the head of the inner circle, so I would imagine that she brings that out often throughout the year. I'm
surprised she's not wearing a sweatshirt that says, "My husband is the head of the inner circle."
and then, jumping on to the next event. We actually step away from Phil for a minute, and we get to see what Larry's been doing.
Yeah, we do.
And
love Larry.
Do you think that Larry has been trying to get with Nancy every single day?
I think there were some days where he did not encounter Nancy. On those days, he did not. Every other day, yes, very much so. Because I feel like Larry, he definitely thinks he's far more than he is in every conceivable way. Which a lot of people do, I'm sure. But he probably doesn't think Nancy's out of his league.
Yeah,
he is incorrect.
Although I partly feel bad for Larry as a character, and I think it's partly because Chris Elliott plays this type of character so well.
He does.
But just throughout the movie, Larry is he's a bit of a schlub, but in this day, he becomes more of a creep.
Yeah, there's a kind of a gormlessness to him. He doesn't realise that when he's saying to Nancy, "Do you want to see the inside of my van?" how that will come off to this beautiful young woman he's seeing for the first time. So yeah, there's just kind of a gormless naivety to somebody who, given how well travelled he is, like he was in San Francisco and then
San Diego.
San Diego, sorry. Then he goes from there to Philadelphia, and just he's experienced parts of the world. You'd think he would be more well versed in social norms, but no, he's very much not. And then he takes back most of his tip. as well, which nice touch.
Yes, instead of leaving $2 for a tip, he leaves $1.
Yep, but at least he takes the more crumpled one. So.
And then one other thing that I noticed in this scene that I mentioned a few days ago, well, just a couple days ago, because the nurse in the hospital is the biggest speaking role for a non-white actor in this entire movie.
And then we have the bartender.
And then I did forget about the bartender, who he does get 3 lines during Phil's date with Rita, where he says, "For you, miss." And that's his only line. And then also during the Groundhog's Day report, we see the back of the head of a guy who says, "Nice speech, Phil, very nice." Those are the only speaking roles of non-white actors in this entire film.
So racism is over. We've solved it. See, I am... That's terrible, obviously. I don't know how well that would represent the town of Punxsutawney in the early 90s. My guess would be well, but having never been there, I can't say for definite. The only person I know from there is white, and you've already had their partner on the show. That'll be Todd. But I'm glad that the route the film didn't take was that the bartender was the traditional magical Negro character who, little twinkle in their eye, casts a spell, and the day is over.
Although he does have, I feel like he has this like asshole detector where he gets this like magical, in this head nod, like, no, not again. Like I've seen this before.
That comes with the territory of having been a bartender for so many years. You pick up on these things.
And then it's almost the exact same head shake that he does after Phil says a prayer for world peace.
Oh, that's a line. That's not going to work, mate. Yeah. He's seen every aspect of humanity in working in that bar, and yeah, nothing's going to get past him. It's a shame he's not more of a character. And
then also, like in terms of the Bechdel test, which I don't think it's too fair to try and put the Bechdel test into this movie because there are so few scenes, and actually now that I think about it, this is one of, I think, the only scene, possibly, like I haven't thought about it throughout the rest of the movie, but I think this could be the only scene that does not have Phil in it.
I'm thinking, and the closest I can think of is when he's dead and he's a corpse, which he's in it technically, but literally not in spirit. But that's the closest I can think of. And like when Phil drives off with the groundhog, you then have a couple of shots of Rita and Larry talking about, let's go after him with the camera and everything. But that's still very much about Phil.
Yeah, and this is technically about Phil because they do mention Phil after Rita comes into the bar, and Larry introduces Nancy to Rita, which I think it's one of only 3 interactions with 2 women speaking to each other. There's the 3 old women in the car. There's Nancy and Rita saying hi to each other, and then there's Rita and the piano teacher.
Yep, and I think Rita and Doris might have a couple of words in the diner, but even then, it's not enough to add it to the list.
Right.
Yeah, but again, this film it's about Phil. So I agree that it's not very fair to well, I wouldn't expect this film to pass the Bechdel test. Every film should, but I wouldn't expect this one to, given the subject matter.
Yeah, and then we move right into Phil playing piano. We get to see the fruits of his piano lessons.
Yes, so somewhere in this day, he had a lesson. Because the piano teacher still says... does she have a name, or is she just a piano teacher?
She's just a piano teacher. In the days that we talked about her, I refer to her as Peggy because that's the actress's name.
Okay, so she talks to Rita and says that Phil is her student. So Phil, prioritizing all the things that are going wrong in the town, he managed to find, I'm going to say, at least an hour for her to say that he is my student. It's going to need to be a full lesson. So he's going to have eked out an hour of time where nothing more important he could be doing is happening.
Yes, and I am
have this
curious as to how much, how that lesson would have gone for her to, basically claim ownership of her, and he is that good, at least partially because of her instruction.
Yeah, because he had some lessons where he'd already seen her for a few days, but then he said that he hadn't had any lessons before, but his dad was a piano mover, I think, which is a wonderful, fantastic line. This is such a well-written film. The line, "What if there is no tomorrow, there wasn't one today," is just one of the best written lines in all of film, in my opinion. I love that line, and I'm glad that you use it in your intro. Excellent. I love hearing it 3 times a day. Very good. But he would have, I presume for the lesson they had today, he would probably have said, "I've had a few lessons," or "I used to learn, but I've forgotten a little bit. I just want a refresher," perhaps. But I appreciate that. I don't know if Phil is still playing the game where he's trying to get to February 3rd, or if he's just living his day the best he can and enjoying it. Because if he is doing it where he's trying to get to February 3rd, or he wants to, if he wants, when he gets February 3rd, to have lived the best February 2nd, then it's correct that he should still be paying the piano teacher for all of the hard work she's put in all of the many February 2nds in the past. So I appreciate that he's having the lesson just so he can effectively give her the money. She will take it.
Do you think that he's still paying her $1,000, or do you think that he, worked out, the exact right amount of money?
Yeah. He would have, the first day's 1,000, next day he might try 900, and slowly work his way down until she says no. And then the next day he goes back to like $1 over that. And he's worked out the exact figure by trial and error. I'm approaching this from an engineer's perspective, as well as what we would do in engineering.
Well, and I think that does fit with early Phil, but it's tough to really say, because this is reformed Phil. This isn't brute force Phil, because it was brute force Phil, engineer Phil, that was going on the first date with Rita, where he was, trying to get the exact right series of events. And this is Phil trying, and again, jumping ahead a bit, this is Phil just trying to be happy.
Yes, and he succeeds. Spoiler alert. But paying for the lesson he receives and the lessons that he has received makes him happy, because it presumably makes Peggy happy, which in turn makes him happy. So yes, I just like that that he found time for a lesson in this perfect day.
Yeah,
but I do feel sorry for Peggy's next student, who comes to her with no experience, and she's like, "Well, I'm such a great teacher. This is what I did with Phil," and then he was part of a band that evening.
Yeah, and the music that Phil's playing here, it's just, in the soundtrack, it's just referred to as Phil's piano solo. It starts off as like a boogie woogie piece, and then whenever Rita comes in, he starts playing Rachmaninoff's 18th variation from Rhapsody on a Theme of Paganini, which is a bit more than a mouthful.
Yeah, it sounds delicious. So we know that Phil has learned at least these 2 songs. I think he's been playing for far longer than these 2, because Nancy in the bar, she's like, "Oh, Phil Connors, he's already in there." So I feel like his piano playing is what is sparking his notoriety of being at the party.
And on top of that, and I did mention it in the days where we talked about his piano lessons, but he transitions from the Rhapsody on a Theme of Paganini into a more jazzy number that becomes something else. And that transition itself is something that's extremely difficult to do, because it's easier to learn a series of notes to play a song. It's more difficult to learn the specific songs that Phil is playing, because they're, especially the boogie woogie piece sounds very complicated. It's very fast. There's a lot of quick notes in there. Like the actual Rachmaninoff seems like something that he could learn over the course of a few months. But to learn 3 different styles of music and also to learn in order, because he's basically composing or he's like freestyling, which the actual piano performer, his name is Terry Fryer. He was a musician.
Wait, it's not Bill Murray playing?
No, although
What? This film was a lie.
Although according to IMDb trivia, which David and I were not so sure about that, but whenever he's kind of fumbling with Rachmaninoff and making a lot of errors, they claim that that's actually Bill Murray playing, but we don't know about that. It seems like a little bit too good to be somebody that hasn't had any training. But
maybe Bill Murray did a little bit, perhaps. I don't know. Maybe he looked like he was moving correctly from the elbows up, perhaps. Maybe he did a little bit of practice.
So Terry Fryer, he's a musician based out of Chicago, which makes sense since this was filmed, in the Chicago suburbs, for the most part. And the only, and I couldn't find like practically no information on him. I did find like one YouTube video that was just this piano scene, and in the comments they said somebody said that they actually asked him, and he said that there wasn't any sheet music. He just basically free-formed it. Like he just it was just like a jazzy session, to where this was them just.
So maybe that's what he had his lesson. Maybe he went to Peggy saying, "I'm actually quite good at playing the piano. Never tried jazz. Can you teach me some jazz piano?" Like maybe she taught him a different style of piano. He went to her as a skilled sheet pianist, but he wanted to try something different, try some jazz. Maybe in the later stages of his lessons, she was teaching him different styles. I've never taken a piano lesson. I don't know if this is how it works at all. 20 years ago, I could play the chorus to Rock Around the Clock. And that's the be-all and end-all of my basically entire music playing of any instrument. So this could be completely wrong. It's just a theory.
The only song that I ever learned was, one of the most basic, that Mary Had a Little Lamb.
Yeah, I think I learned that on recorder. And then I threw the recorder away because it's a horrible instrument. It just shouldn't exist. It's a terrible noise.
And then after the piano, we get
Fred and Debbie.
Fred and Debbie, yes. Michael Shannon and Hendon Walsh.
Yes, one of these has gone on to be a household name.
And the other has become a, not well-known, but a well-versed voice actress.
Yes.
You might not know her face, but if you're a fan of cartoons, you've definitely heard her voice at some point. And I've talked about her a bit more before, but she's the voice of Starfire and Teen Titans and Princess Bubblegum are probably 2 of her most well-known roles.
Did she do Starfire in the Teen Titans film? Go to the movies. 'Cause if she did, then that's the only thing I would have heard her in. Scanning down her CV, she was in that one. Good. So I've heard her in that and nothing else. But I'm glad that she's gone on to have a career.
Yeah,
but more importantly, Michael Shannon.
And although honestly, I feel like Hendon Walsh gives the better performance in just this brief moment. And I was able to catch her, like they do a pan in the crowd scene whenever Phil's playing the piano, and you see her just dancing like crazy. Like if you see her dancing, she's just like shaking her head. She is going crazy on the dance floor. And
I do like when you pick out the actors you recognise in the dancing. Like Buster and his wife are doing the proper like clicking as they swing their fingers is their dance move, which is nice. Just picking up on Bryle Murray's talents there of clicking rather than actually dancing. And the piano teacher's weird like wrist clap dance that she's doing as Phil is playing I've never seen that anywhere else. But yeah, I see Fred and Debbie dancing, and Debbie is really going for it. She's putting it all out there.
And so, where do you think Phil got these WrestleMania tickets? In the
no
middle
idea.
of Punxsutawney, in the middle of a blizzard.
I'm generally good at working out a theory for how something could happen in a film. I can't, unless he already had them. I don't, or he found somebody who had them and couldn't make it. But I cannot think of a possible way of how he would get those tickets, given that nothing can arrive from anywhere else. He cannot go anywhere else to get anything.
Actually, I do like
so these
that. I was thinking about, maybe he had them on him, but I do like your idea that you just kind of skimmed over the fact that he basically bartered for them. I think that it's not too far of a leap that one of the people that he helps happened to have these WrestleMania tickets, and
and they already couldn't go for some
Yes.
reason. They were double booked. Yes.
And then Phil helped them
okay.
out in some sort of way.
So the people we know he helped, the old woman with the tire, I would be very surprised if they had WrestleMania tickets. Okay, maybe it's Felix. He fixes Felix's back. And I'd like that Felix is a returning character. He's one of the guys from the security,
the
armored car.
He's the only one that of the two that gets a name. I don't believe the other one gets his name spoken out loud.
So maybe there's a deleted scene where Felix is a big wrestling fan, but now his back is fixed. His wife is taking him salsa dancing instead, and he can't make it to the to WrestleMania. And so he's, thanks for fixing my back. You can make use of these, I guess.
And that's why Phil apologizes to him, too.
Yeah. Felix is livid. He's been siphoning money off from the armored car for months trying to afford these WrestleMania tickets. He's finally stolen enough, and then they get taken away from him. This is my backstory.
All right, so what do you think is like Phil's agenda, like his itinerary for the day? Because I think that he clearly must have done something at the diner, because that's how, that's where Michael Shannon and Hendon was. That's where
and Doris recognized him from
Doris
there as well.
was there, and also Felix would have been in the nearby vicinity, because we saw Doris gets changed from the armored car, so that must be near the diner, and maybe that was like the diner pickup, like picking up their deposit.
Yes, yeah. So so I did actually try and work out his itinerary and try and put it, because it's like an A5 page list of everything. So his day starts with buying insurance from Ned, which we'll get there, because he runs into him early on. Then he convinces everyone to be near him for the broadcast, does the broadcast, catches the kid, changes the tire. Then he goes to the diner and talk to Debbie, run into Felix, suggests to Felix, hey Felix, just lie on this table for a second, and Gus, Ralph, you grab his hands, I'll grab his legs. And
he pushes him over a trash can. He does the Homer Simpson back fixer.
Yes, absolutely. So he does that out back of the diner. He's like, okay, just lie down, do this. Then he talks to Debbie, Doris, whatever. Does he do anything for Doris? I don't know. Gives us some money to put towards going to Paris. Then,
well, I think he makes a scene in the diner, like a scene as in a good way, because that's where he talks with Fred and Debbie, and I think he also probably does something for several of the other patrons there.
Yeah. So I don't remember everyone and their little backstories in the I Am a God scene. But did any of those have any hopes and dreams and wishes that he could have helped with?
I don't think so. I mean, there's the waiter that paints soldiers and is gay.
Do you reckon Phil ever prevented the other waiter from dropping the tray of plates? That happened. Even when he knows it's going to happen, he doesn't do anything to stop it. Just wait. Suppose he needs it to happen to prove to Rita that it's going to happen, and that he knows it's going to happen. But I would hope at least he does something to prevent that from happening.
Yeah, I would imagine that he would, because that is, again, it feels like a minor inconvenience. It's a little bit more of an inconvenience, especially if it's a small town diner. Like, if those dishes break, then they would have to replace those, and that costs money. So
maybe Phil even pulled a shift at the diner. he like helped out there for a couple of hours. Like you're clearly busy. This is the busiest day of the year. You seem to be understaffed. I'm just gonna. You got a spare apron? I'll run tables for a couple of hours. Give the guy a break. That he's got something going on in his day. He's busy. His mind's elsewhere. That's why he drops the tray. Yeah.
I don't think that he would go that far, but I think that he could like help out without helping out, like just doing a bunch of little things that just takes a moment for him because he knows exactly how everything's going to go.
Like the lighting of the cigarette, that kind of thing. Just yeah. Okay. So maybe he moves. Maybe the waiter who drops the tray, he can't put it onto the table that he's on far enough because there's like some ketchup in the way. So maybe Phil just gets in and moves the ketchup. So that just little things. Okay, I'm on board with that. Okay, yeah. So then after he's at the diner, he then has to go and sort out Buster at the restaurant. Then have a piano lesson, get the WrestleMania tickets at some point, convince the band to let him play the dance, and then we have the evening, which we haven't got to yet.
Well, I think it wouldn't be too hard to convince the band because we do see Peggy take over at the keyboard. Yes. So it's entirely possible that Peggy is the one that is supposed to be playing the piano as part of the band.
And maybe she has been, and Phil just kind of said, "Oh, Peggy, do you want to have a break for a couple of songs? Go and get yourself a drink, have some food. I'll sit in for you for 3 to 6 songs for half an hour."
Exactly.
I feel like that could have happened, yeah.
Yeah. And then now we're up to the Bachelor auction.
Yes, which I'm shocked has not come up at any point in the film prior to this, given it happens every day. But I did think that maybe earlier iterations, they didn't hold it because Buster died. Because Phil wasn't there to give him the Heimlich. Buster maybe hasn't been alive at this point in the day, so maybe I know that they've still held the banquet because in that first day, Rita invites Phil to join them for the banquet, and Phil says that he's had Groundhog for lunch. So they still had the banquet, but they didn't maybe have the Bachelor auction because that's like it's Buster's thing. He always hosts it. We couldn't possibly do it without Buster. Just in a sign of remembrance, we're just not going to have it this evening, perhaps. But now he's alive, he's doing it. That's my theory.
and we get the bidding war between Doris and Nancy.
Yeah.
Which I'm a little disappointed. I feel like this would have been the perfect opportunity to bring back the one unnamed woman in the French maid outfit that he went to see Heidi 2 with. Because
I had always remembered as being Nancy. I know that she's in the scene as well, so that was an incorrect memory. But I'd always forgotten. Like, there's another woman, just another rat. She's there too. He's working his way through the town.
Which those are basically the only single women that we see that's closer to Phil's age. Because Phil is, Bill Murray was 42 whenever he filmed this.
Yes. It would have been weird if they had just every female character who had been in the film so far. Like, if Buster's wife bid on him, if Debbie bid on him. Debbie. The evening of her wedding, she's bidding on another man.
Which, and that reminds me that I skipped over that bit, but that is one of the funniest bits I think in this day, and I think it's so fascinating. We only see them for like a minute, but just the two of them, we see we can really get the dynamic of their relationship.
Yeah,
just in this 1 minute, because Debbie, whenever she goes to thank Phil, she kisses him on the lips. Like it's a super quick peck, and I'm looking at it. She might not even fully even get to his lips. It might even just be like an air kiss. But
yeah.
She goes for his lips, and then Fred sees her giving Phil a kiss, and so he's like, "Oh, so we're kissing now."
Yeah, quick peck on the cheek for Rita. Yeah.
Yeah, and he goes for the cheek. and then Debbie
is staring daggers at him.
Yes.
We are leaving now.
And she pulls him from it with his shirt. away, like in a very aggressive manner.
Yeah, they're gonna have a talk. Maybe they won't make it to WrestleMania. Who knows? But yeah, it's compare that to the giant smack on the lips that Buster's wife gives Phil for saving his life. It's much more of a kiss from Buster's wife.
Yeah.
Brenda Pickleman is my favorite acting name in the film. It's the name of Buster's wife, Brenda Pickleman. So I had to get that in somewhere. Done. But I got from Michael Shannon's performance, it reminded me a lot of like a young DiCaprio. The expressions he's putting, the way he's got his hair, just how excited he gets at the WrestleMania tickets. I was really reminded of a young DiCaprio performance as well.
And I do think it's interesting because, I'm looking at this on a micro level. I'm so drawn to Hynden Walsh's performance, like just all the subtleties in her facial acting. Well, I guess it's not really subtle. It's like very clear. It's almost animated. The amount of facial movements that she does, but that she is so good at physical acting that she ended up having much more of a career in voice acting and hasn't really done as much in physical acting.
Well, I feel like, yes, so I've done some voiceover things here. This is nothing professional, just some podcast stuff, and I find like physical acting whilst you're doing some voiceover stuff does help. Like arms flailing or expressions or whatever, just trying to get more into the character. I find does help with the performance. So as animated as Hynden Walsh as Debbie is in this scene, it does make sense that she might go into voice acting, because it's not just sit in front of a microphone and talk. That's podcasting. She's voice acting is more to it than that, I think. So it makes sense to me.
And then after this, we get Larry coming up. He saw Phil go up there, and then it just his amount.
Oh, we skipped over the Rita winning Phil for $339.88. But all of the cash she has in her wallet. That's a lot of cash to have in a wallet, in a handbag. And today I think I worked out it'd be $642 in 2021 money, inflation. So that's a fair old chunk of change.
Well, she is a producer, so she probably has to have some extra cash on hand for any incidental.
Yes, that makes sense. Yeah, and I don't know if there is an ATM in Punxsutawney. Presumably there must be for Phil. There's a bank, so maybe there is. But yeah, well, I suppose she wouldn't know if definitely there will be or not, so it makes sense to have that money in there. So yeah, so we move on to Larry and his far less successful auction attempt.
And I love that, Nancy doesn't even bother.
She's like, no, I'm fine. I'd rather have nothing than Larry.
But I also think that, like, from Nancy's point of view, she's probably thinking, I don't even have to bid on him because, if I don't bid on him and clearly nobody else will,
he's gonna come back.
Yeah. So why put any money towards it, other than the fact that I guess it is supposedly for charity.
Yeah. But then she would then feel obligated to spend time with him, rather. Which, but I like Doris's face when Larry comes up on the stage, where it's like, ugh. The only excited people are the old ladies from the car.
So what do you think that date is going to consist of? And I also love that, whenever he's gets bought for 2 bits, aka 25 cents, and I love that bit too. That the elderly woman, she's like, I bid 2 bits.
Buster doesn't even try and continue the bidding. Not even a 30 cents. Just 25. Okay, yep, done. That seems fair for this guy.
Which I wouldn't have even known that 2 bits was 25 cents.
I think I know that from Who Framed Roger Rabbit with the shave and a haircut, 2 bits. I've then looked into where did that come from, it being 2 bits. So yeah, I couldn't tell you the history of it, but I know it from other films, which is how I know everything. It's just from other films. But yeah, the date that Larry has with this lady, I'm going to assume it's going to involve changing any like light bulbs that she's got in her house that need changing, fixing anything that needs to. It's not going to be. I don't think it's going to be very romantic. I think it's just going to be, what odd jobs has she got that he can do?
Yeah, I can see that. I need you to clean out my gutters, and
he's a tall guy. He can do things that she can't. I have an elderly neighbour whose dog I walk, and she lives alone, and she often has little jobs that need doing, and so I've changed every light bulb in her house in the past few years. So just because she can't reach them, and I can. So.
And I love his little moments, like after she wins, he like puts his hand over his eyes to look out into the crowd, and then he sees who it was, and you can clearly see that he does mouth the words, "Oh shit."
Yes, this is not how he expected it to go. And then we move on to Ned Ryerson.
Yes, the triumphant return of Ned Ryerson.
Yes.
And
this is my theory for what may have sparked the next day. Potentially. I feel like this is the first day that, like, every day Phil has tried to live the perfect day or just be happy. This is the first day that he's buckled and actually bought insurance from Ned. He's given it, however many times he's gone through the loop. This is the one where he's finally given it, okay, let's see what happens when I do this. Let's see if that makes me any happier. And he goes in on everything, every kind of insurance.
Even the Uniflex.
So Ned is the devil. So Ned is Satan. That's how I'm reading this. Ned is the devil. He's the one who put Phil in this. They never went to school together. That's all a lie. This is how every customer Ned has had, he gets one customer a day. He finds somebody, he puts them in an endless time loop until they buy all the insurance from him, then he moves on to the next person. That's how he does it. Because if the devil's going to be alive today, they're going to be an insurance salesman. I feel like that's fair. It's on the list.
Yeah, actually, there is that is a theory that somebody has put out there into the internet in a way, like some of their additional arguments for that is that, life insurance in a way is like selling your soul. And this is their words, not mine.
It's also kind of buying your future, like putting money into your future and your safety in the future and those around you in the future. So by getting life insurance, Phil is kind of buying his future. He's moving on. He's thinking ahead to what is going to happen after today and into tomorrow and beyond. So I am talking completely out of my ass, but this could be a theory.
And on top of that, there's some visual symbolism there, because there's that groundhog quilt in the background, and it forms almost a sort of cross or a halo or like a mandala behind Phil's head as he's talking to Ned about the life insurance.
I'm not a fan of the pose that they've chosen for the groundhog on that quilt. It's not very Groundhog-esque. The fact that it's in Punxsutawney makes it Groundhog, but it's just kind of, it's a bit of a blob with a tail and kind of a nose. I feel like they could have, if they wanted something to look like a groundhog, they could have done more than they've done.
And yeah, I can see that. I mean, we did see a lot of kind of blobby groundhog ice sculptures.
Yes. Which, it can look like a beaver, it can look like some kind of a vole or a mouse, depending on scale. But bear in mind, I'm coming from the perspective of somebody who does a podcast about sharks. It's a lot easier to identify a shark than it is a groundhog. I appreciate that. But I feel like a little extra time could have been spent in selecting this groundhog profile for the quilt.
I think Stephen Tobolowsky, he is so great, and like he only gets a handful of scenes in this entire movie.
Well, he's fourth billed, but the first time I saw this film, I remembered him more than I remembered Chris Elliott and Andy McDowell. He's like Stephen Tobolowsky. I didn't know who he was before I saw this film. I wanted to see everything he was in after this film. I've watched Glee because he was in it.
And actually, I believe that his character name in Glee is the last name is Ryerson.
Yes, it is. Yep. I was like, oh, wonderful, that's great. And my wife didn't understand why I was happy about that. My wife, not a fan of Groundhog Day. she's the person I found who dislikes this film intensely. Because it's the same thing over and over again. I was like, well, you should never listen to this podcast.
Yeah.
Or indeed most podcasts.
And this is only his 6th scene, and that includes one scene where he just gets punched immediately.
Yep. Oh, and I know you've already talked about it. He sells that punch beautifully.
And, he sells this scene beautifully, too. Like, I love everything that he does in this scene. And I also really love the fact that I think this is the first time since, like, maybe the very beginning that Rita actually gets a chance to have some Phil-style humor.
Yeah. Yeah, let's not ruin it. And what is that noise that he made? Like, it's like a cat mixed, but it's a noise I cannot do and will not even try. But it's such a bizarre, it's like a yawning cat crossed with some kind of like a comb, running a finger down a comb. It's a weird. I love everything. It's a choice. It's a very out there choice. I'm here for it. It's a perfect character. It's a perfect supporting character. Tobolowsky is, if you want somebody to play an incredibly irritating person, he is near top of that list for someone you can get who will completely nail it. And this is a pitch perfect performance.
And he has the timing of everything just so down, and just the way that he just keeps talking after they leave to nobody, but you completely believe it because that's exactly what Ned as this character would have done in this moment.
Yeah, and I love that Phil, he's had so many interactions with Ned that he's down with the play fighting, like the mock punching that they do in the air, because that's exactly what Ned does. So Phil's like, yeah, why not? When in Rome, kind of thing. It's a little thing.
And I will disagree with you slightly, because you said that you think that he does the insurance at the very beginning of the day and then does the broadcast. But I think that he runs into Ned on his way to the broadcast like he usually does. But I think that the actual, signing of everything and drawing it all up, I think he's like, he tells Ned at that moment, I'm going to buy all the insurance. Why don't you go write things up? I have to do the broadcast here. And
I'll meet you at the diner at 12, kind of thing. Yeah. I think it would be too much to buy it on the way to. It's like you wouldn't just be like, what have you got? I'll sign something, give me a piece of paper, and then add everything to it now. There's not enough time. Yeah, you're right.
It feels like this has gone quick, but I think we've already been talking for an hour.
We're not even done yet.
If we do get to the first time that Phil and Rita are alone in this entire day.
Yeah.
And he spends it.
They didn't see each other between him turning her down for coffee and then her arriving at the dance. So yeah.
Although I do think that they have to have at least a few hours, at least a couple hours here from the end of the auction to this moment here. And I think that's also something that our mind kind of fills in the blanks, because I think if you don't have that, then this moment feels a little bit unearned, because
they would have spent a bit more time together at the dance, perhaps, like actually dancing. But
Phil has spent a lot of time with Rita, but Rita has not spent all this time with Phil. She's only really spent last night and then this morning.
Yeah, I've seen some pieces written on the internet about watching Groundhog Day from the perspective of Rita, where you have the first day, then you have this day, and how it's a drastic change in her thoughts on Phil from one to the next. And when I rewatched the film, I went into it with that perspective, watching that February 1st with her. And Phil's not that much of a dick. He is a dick, granted. At the start of this film, he's not a nice guy. But a lot of the things he says in the first day, everyone has a bad day, everyone has a bad mood. A lot of the comments he makes could be written up as he's just not in a good place, so he's having a bad mood at the moment. He's going somewhere he doesn't particularly enjoy, so maybe he's just not enjoying that. But he's having a conversation. Yes, he says people don't like blood sausage, people are morons. I particularly like blood sausage. Black pudding. It's delicious. It's great as part of a breakfast.
And also, it is playful. Like it's.
Yeah, he's saying that he's got a sense of humor. He's successful. Yes, he's a bit full of himself. He calls himself the talent. I feel like Rita's thoughts on Phil, it entirely hangs on the scene we don't see, which is dinner between her and Larry. Phil's going to come up during that dinner. Larry's worked with him before, quite a bit, it seems. It depends on what Larry says about Phil, whether Rita believes what Larry is saying. I don't know. It all depends on what happens there, and I would like to see that conversation. I'd like just one extra scene without Phil.
And I've also come to the theory that Rita is not brand new to the station. She's just brand new to being the producer on this morning on the news.
Yeah, she might have worked her way up, yeah.
And so I think that Rita and Phil have been aware of each other. They just haven't had any real direct contact until now.
Yeah, there is a bit where Phil says, "You are new," earlier, but that could just be he hasn't noticed her before or hasn't been aware of her, whereas she might be more aware of him.
Well, I actually, and I talked about it in an earlier episode, so I'm not going to go too deep into it, but I feel like that, because it hinges on whenever he mentions that he fell in love with her the first moment he saw her. And I feel like that was like early on whenever he first noticed her and then developed this like slight infatuation. And
right, so not necessarily when she's playing with the blue screen.
Right.
During his weather broadcast, yeah, okay.
But in knowing about her, she was never the type of person that he thought that he would be interested in as a person, or that she would be interested in him. Like, he didn't think that they would mesh, and so he never bothered trying to meet her or date her because he wasn't her type.
Do you think if his attempts to woo her earlier in the film had been more successful, she wouldn't be his subject of infatuation now? If she'd been as easy to bed as Nancy?
Oh, that's a good question, because
is this what he's after what he can't have?
It could be a bit of that, but I do think that the film throws a lot of hints that they are a good match with each other, because Rita is clearly intelligent, she's well read, and Phil, we don't see a ton of it, but he's also clearly very intelligent. He's just not as cultured. Like, he has bits and pieces.
But at the start of the day, he was referencing Chekhov in his speech, so maybe he is like you probably talked about it, the scene between Phil and Rita where she talks about her perfect man. Where she said he has to be too humble to know he's perfect, intelligent, supportive, funny, romantic, courageous, a good body but not vain, kind, sensitive, gentle, not afraid to cry, likes animals, children, will change poopy diapers, plays an instrument, and loves his mother. And a lot of that he's ticked off today. I think he's now, whether intentionally or not, changed himself enough to be her perfect man.
Yeah, I like the idea that his failed during the science experiment date, like his second date with Rita. That is what inspires him to really better himself. Yeah. And then through bettering himself, he becomes someone that Rita is more interested in.
Yes, I agree. Yeah. I think the only things on that list he doesn't prove, or we don't see him change a poopy diaper. He may do at some point. We don't know. It's not shown. He doesn't ever interact with animals beyond. He shows more respect for the groundhog, but that's about it. I think that's as far as we got. And the good body but not vain isn't really shown. He cannot change his body, it seems.
Yeah.
He has remained in the 43-year-old Bill Murray. There are worse bodies to be in. There are better bodies to be in.
And then we get to see him do like a second ice sculpture, which the first sculpture completely throws me off, and I talked about that before. I'm not going to talk about it again. Like, just the timing of where that ice sculpture comes in just doesn't make sense to me. But this one makes a bit more sense. It's smaller. It is a very good face, but it is.
Yeah, whether it is actually Dad's face or not, yet to be determined.
Yeah, I didn't look at it that closely to see if there's a resemblance.
I'm looking at it right now, and it's a face. It's far better than I could do, but it is a face. But the line, "I know your face so well, I could have done it with my eyes closed." Other films, other characters, that is the creepiest thing you could possibly say to somebody who you hadn't spoken to until yesterday. Like this, that would be could be a huge red flag. If that was Larry saying that to Nancy, there would be a Nancy-shaped hole in whatever wall she was nearest. But then we get the no matter what happens tomorrow for the rest of my life, I'm happy now, and that seems to be the moment where everything changes. He's happy not just with where he is, but with himself, and he's just generally happy.
Yeah, I personally, I love and I hate this line at the same time.
It really spells it out for us.
Yes, I love it.
I'm happy now, everyone, I'm happy.
Yes, and then he goes and ruins it with, "Because I love you."
Ugh.
And that, because the first line really embodies what I think this film is all about. So because Phil was not happy in his life in Pittsburgh. He was not happy in his job. He wasn't happy with himself. And then he spent years in the last part of this film, he's bettering himself. He's helping others. He's doing things to make him happy, and not just surface level happy, but real deep soul happy. And he's done that through study. He's done that through art. He's done that through culture. He's done that through the community. And that is something that, everybody can really strive for, and is something worthwhile. And that's a lesson worth learning through this movie. And then that final 5% of him doing this is Rita. And if you remember, the last time he told Rita that he loved her, it was after a very wonderful date where he was doing supposedly all the right things, even though, looking back on it, it was all surface level things. And
that didn't end well.
Yeah.
If I recall.
Yeah, she said that, "You love me, you don't even know me."
Yeah.
And I do like that she doesn't say that her response is not, "I love you too." Her response is, "I think I'm happy too."
Yeah. I hadn't picked up on that she doesn't reciprocate. Why would she? She's known this guy for 2 days.
Right.
Yeah.
But
she's open to it. She's not actively balking at the idea. Maybe she's quite full of high opinion of herself. Like, yeah, of course you love me. I'm Rita. Everyone loves me. Maybe I could love you too. We'll see where it goes.
Yeah, but she's accepting of his love, and she sees the type of person he is in these few hours. And I think that part of it, I think part of why Phil is so liked by everybody is partly what he's been doing, but I like to think that there's also just throughout each loop, he's putting an energy into the universe. And whenever he's putting negative energy, then people are more likely to treat him negatively. And I feel like there's a bit of energy that follows through each loop. And he spent probably, months to years, depending on your idea, building on positivity and positive energy. And I think that makes the people more reciprocative of what he's putting out there. And I think that's because this is magical. It's unexplainable, and I think that theory helps explain why people are so more quickly accepting over the course of a single day.
Yeah, I like that theory. And I think during that kiss, it starts to snow, and Phil gives the snowflakes a look of, I read it as surprise. I think that he's been awake and outside and in this place at some point before, and it didn't snow. And I feel like he's looked up and he's seen the snow, and something has changed already at that point. He's not. He probably like doubts his memory in some way. Like, surely not. Maybe there was a light flurry somewhere. I don't recall it, but I think that's the point where things change, because he's admitted he's happy. She said she thinks she's happy too. He said he loves her. They kiss. That's at that point. He's now off the loop. It is in my theory.
So,
because it snowed. It's something different.
So you think, which I was going to get into. I know you mentioned the insurance as, the one different thing, but
that's
yeah,
kind of joking.
But in a more serious way, I feel like, in my opinion, I think yesterday for Phil was probably 99% similar to today.
Yes.
And if that's true, like, what do you think is that 1% difference that, what is it about today versus yesterday that Phil has crossed that threshold to allow him to get out of the loop?
I honestly think that all of his actions were exactly the same, or very, very similar, and I feel like it's an internal change. I feel like he's maybe lived this day, he's perfected this day, and already lived through it 20, 100, 1,000 times. I don't know, just doing as much as he can, as perfect as he can, all these little things, and it's internally he is now accepted. Okay, if this is where I am, this is what I'm doing. I'm just going to keep doing it because it's making me happy, and this life that I've now created for myself, this repetition, is making me happy. So I've accepted it. It's that internal acceptance of he's stuck here. This is all it is. He's still gonna make the best of it and be happy with it. And if he gets to do this all again tomorrow, and he gets to win Rita over again tomorrow, fantastic. He gets to win over the love of his life again and again and again, and that's going to make him the happiest he can be.
Yeah, I think that's perfect, and I think that is pretty much what it is about. It is about him accepting his own happiness to be in the situation that he's in.
I'm glad they didn't have. I think there was an early draft that had he was cursed by an old girlfriend or something. I'm sure you know this. We've both listened to Groundhog Day Minute, and I'm glad they didn't have that. I like that air of mystery, but also there's enough of an explanation you can read into it here. It's magical realism. He's a bad guy. The universe conspired to make him a good guy. That's all you need sometimes. It's a film.
We've gone through this day beat by beat. Is there anything else that you want to say about the events that happen in this day?
I'd love to get into the next day, but I will save that for some other time, because that is when the true nightmare begins, I think. Well, it's not the next day I want to get into. It's like 2 weeks from now, when Phil is insane. He doesn't know what's going to happen next. Every moment is a waking nightmare. He's spent. I don't know, it's a regular thing of how many times he's been in the loop. For me, thousands of years. I don't know a different date, but it's an eternity. Time has lost all meaning to him. We had at the time of recording, it's mid 2021. There was a pandemic recently. I'm sure you're aware, where lots of people were stuck in their home living. It felt like Groundhog Day again and again and again being the same. Time lost all meaning, and that was over the course of 4 months. This has been far more than that. A day is nothing to him anymore. So he is going to descend into some kind of madness. He already has, probably several times over the course of his eternity in Groundhog Day. Beyond that, I cannot imagine a mind being capable of the amount of time he spent in a Groundhog Day then grappling with this ever-changing, what could happen? The weather's going to change. He can now speak to so many other, he can go so many other places, things are just going to change beyond his control, and he's going to go mad. he's going to need to be checked into some kind of 80s, 90s magical sitcom rehab center with people who have been through body swaps with their parents and people who've created a mystery girl from the internet. And all these things that are going to just wreck somebody's entire psyche beyond the film they were in. So that's the film I want to see. Groundhog Day 2, and it's just Phil rocking back and forward in a straitjacket. But in terms of this loop, no, I'm good. I think we've covered everything.
I don't know. Personally, I think Phil is the type of character that could cope, especially for all the self-improvements that he's done in this single day. I think he's gotten to the point where he's accepted that this day is going to repeat forever, and then whenever it doesn't, he's already in a state of mind of acceptance that I think that he's pretty easily going to accept that.
Yes, I suppose I'm looking at this from the perspective of somebody who lived something not that similar to this, but close enough for the real world for 3 or 4 months. Maybe that eternity of perspective, well, certainly that eternity of perspective would give him a different view on things. And yes, maybe during that time he has developed a way of coping. I hope so. I don't want him to become a dribbling wreck. But I wouldn't. I could see that being a direction a sequel would take. People out there, don't make it Groundhog Day 2. We don't. It's fine. Don't do it. Make a new film. Make another Palm Springs.
And then just to double check, since you kind of mentioned it already, and just to clarify if that was a joke or if that's a more serious answer, do you think that Phil was stuck in Groundhog Day for like literally thousands of years?
I absolutely do. Yes, I know he spent at least 6 months tossing cards into a hat, so I think that it's got to be enough time for the roller coaster of happiness, sadness, sanity, insanity that he goes through. It's got to be at least 1,000 years, maybe more. It's a number of days which I can't even fathom. Yeah. Whatever anybody else says, double it. The highest anybody else says, just double it. More than that.
The highest one is Sean German, who he said he went with the Buddhist concept of 10,000 years, which is something that Harold Ramis said.
Right. Well, yeah, it's enough that if Phil were keeping count, he'd lost count a long time ago. I think another early draft had him keeping track of the loops by reading a page of a book. He had like a bookcase of books in his room, and he would read a page of a book, and he like got through the entire bookcase. I would then think he found a library and finished the library as well. Like, so yes, like
in that version, him finishing the library was what prompted the party, and that was his like birthday party that he was throwing for finishing the wall of books.
Yes, and maybe that's that would suck if that's actually what was required to break the loop is finishing the bookcase, and he decided to do it one page at a time because he just didn't know. He could have sat down and knocked him out in a week, maybe, and really plowed through it.
All right. And then the other thing that I've been asking everybody is that, we see a lot of days, but there's a lot of days that we don't see, or a lot of things that Phil would have done throughout his time that we don't get to see. What is that for you that you would like to have seen Phil do?
I have a couple of answers because this episode isn't long enough already. Sorry. I was thinking, like, if I was in his position, what would I do? Because I'm a narcissist. And one of the things about me is I don't eat or drink a lot of different things. I've worked out what I like, and I kind of shun everything else. But I feel like if I was in his position, I would use the opportunity to try more things. So, like, go through... He tries the Rita's favourite disgusting drink. He tries that. I think he would try every drink and cocktail and everything in the bar, every meal at the restaurant, every meal at the diner. This isn't a very cinematic thing to show, is the problem. In the same way that reading a page of the book every day isn't something that you could easily depict. This is how time is passing. It's not very cinematic. So that's one aspect, is just trying the whole menu, trying it, like finding some kind of supermarket there and trying everything in there. But Another one, which I think would work better, but might be a little bit more gory to watch, is he tries breaking a pencil and testing that. He never tries like changing himself, like not suggesting like cut off a finger or something, but like even just giving himself like shaving his head or just like cutting his finger a little bit and then seeing if that healed the next day. I wanted him to do more experimentation with the day. Like, can he change himself in some way?
We do see it in a way, but not in the experimental way, because, I mean, the extreme version of that is him literally blowing himself up.
Yes, he tries dying. I want something a little less extreme than that. Just because he is the only constant from day to day is his memory, basically, is his mind. But I wanted to just expand that. Is that his body as well? If he survives, if he could just like trim his fingernails. Is that the next day? Has he got trimmed fingernails again? Because like shaving his head, that's a nightmare for wardrobe.
I mean, he also mentions that he doesn't have to floss.
True, yes, but I think that's early on in the loop. So he doesn't know that yet. Maybe he's just like, hey, I'm not flossing, and I still haven't got plaque. It's been 3 days. And this is something they did go into on Groundhog Day Minute, and I've been thinking about it a lot ever since, which is, does he have the same poop every day? Like, does he always have the February 1st poop, or the day he eats that massive meal, the following day, does he have a bigger one? Or is it still that same February 1st? This is, again, if I was stuck in here, this is the kind of experiments I would do. It's like, okay, I'm going to have a lot of laxatives today, see what happens tomorrow, and just, what are we dealing with here?
Yeah, I don't know where to go from
there is no response to that.
You completely derailed me. Like I just finished posting all the slap episodes as we record this, but I think you derailed me more than 2 weeks talking about slaps just by bringing up the poop.
Because like it's something you don't think of for good reason. They don't cover it in the film. I don't understand why. But that's where my mind goes. Always in the gutter.
All right. Well, that's all my notes. Was there anything else that you wanted to talk about? So about this loop or about Groundhog Day in general?
No, I think we've covered it all. I mean, this is the film that helped me understand what Americans call flapjacks. Actually, you have your previous guest, Jess Manzo from French to Sunday. She and I have had a long-running debate on what flapjacks are and aren't in America. They're pancakes. In the UK, they're like a granola-based, like an oat and fruit-based snack bar. It's got to the point where I've sent them a flapjack from America from the England that we've made. So just the line "too early for flapjacks." They were talking about it on their podcast one time, flapjacks, and it made a lot more sense to me listening to them what this film meant. Because like going to a fast food restaurant and asking for flapjacks for breakfast was odd because it's like a cake. But hey, it makes sense to me now. That's just a little bit of history I have with the film, and I really do love time loop films, but I feel like I love them because of Groundhog Day. It's like it's the first one I saw, and everyone I've seen since then has always been like, it's good, but it's not Groundhog Day. Yeah, I really liked Palm Springs from earlier this year in the UK, but it's not Groundhog Day. It's a shame. If Groundhog Day didn't exist, that would be a perfect film for me. But Groundhog Day exists, so Palm Springs is a very good film.
Yeah, that's one thing that I've kind of grappled with a little bit. It's where I had parts of me regret starting this with Groundhog Day because the only way to go from is down. But at the same time, how could I not start?
Where else are you going to start? Yeah, this is the right one to start. Like I've always been obsessed with time. In films, I love time travel films. I know that you've had debates on whether this is a time travel film. I think time loop films are a subset of time travel. I think it is still traveling within time, but the time loop is itself a different kind of subgenre. But ever since I was a kid, I've been obsessed with the use of time in films. There was a kids TV show called Bernard's Watch in the UK, which is just about this little kid who had a watch that could stop time. He just presses the watch, and then he stopped time, and he can do whatever he wants throughout the day, and click again, starts time again. Hilarity ensues. And just my dream growing up was like I want that watch. That's what I want. You know, I want the Zach Morris timeout. It's the superpower that I want above all else. Is just I don't know how much it would be a depressing train of thought to run down to work out how much time I've wasted thinking about how I could have had more time in sitcoms or TV shows or whatever.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to pull up that thread right now.
Until it turns into the Twilight Zone episode or the Simpsons episode where you break the time-stopping watch.
And grow up 20 years. Yes. But yeah, time in films and TV shows and everything is always fascinating me, and so throwing a time loop and the fun you can have with that is something I'm always happy to talk about on any podcast and anything you cover in the future.
All right, well, it's been a pleasure having you on here today for not just the longest loop of the movie, but the longest episode of this season.
I'm sorry. I don't know what you expected, but it should have been this.
Oh no, I completely expected this to. Well, practically every episode has run longer than I thought, and I anticipated an hour, and I think we're at an hour 40, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
That's quite all right, but it's always great talking to you. And why don't you go ahead and let everybody know where they can find you and your podcasts and everything online?
I was going to say it's a long episode, but I've got 20 plugs to do first, so let's get into my main thing online is Deep Blue Sea, the podcast, which is something similar to yours. I don't know if it was one of the catalysts that got you into doing this. I hope that it was, but I will take no credit. Where myself and my co-host Mark Hoffmeyer have been going through the Deep Blue Sea franchise, because there are 3 Deep Blue Sea films, guys. 3 of them. I know there's the one everyone knows, and there's the other 2 that went straight to DVD, but they are still. One of them is still worth watching. We went through those DVD chapter by chapter. There's 33 chapters in the first Deep Blue Sea, and then 10 or 11 in 2 and 3. And we just did 1 episode per chapter. And some of those were long chapters, not as long as this. I think our longest one was like 6 minutes, not counting the credits. And our shortest one was about 57 seconds, which is LL Cool J giving an omelette recipe directly into a camera, which we still talked for over an hour about. So we take a lot of tangents. Your podcast is very much on track compared to us. Which that's what happens when you do a podcast with Mark Hoffmeyer, and it turns out me. So fine. So yeah, Deep Blue Sea, the podcast. We have just finished recording our last chapter of Deep Blue Sea 3 at the time of recording this, and we have plans for the future where, looking ahead, 2022 is going to see us doing the same treatment with Con Air, a film that Mark and I both have a lot of feelings for, all positive. But between now and then, we're going to be doing some one-offs, looking at what I've been referring to as Deep Blue Sea adjacent films. So films like The Jaw. These are films that have come up a lot on the Deep Blue Sea podcast, but I have never seen before. Things like the Jaws sequels, The Shallows, other films directed by Rennie Harlin, that kind of thing. So, and you can find me on Twitter at Life vs Film, Life versus Film, which is the name of my personal blog, where my main aim is to review the 1001 movies you must see before you die, a list that I think Groundhog Day does appear on, so I will be reviewing it and hopefully releasing that review the same day this comes out. So head over to lifeversusfilm.com to read my thoughts that I've mainly said on today's show, maybe a few other ones if I can think of them. There, and I do a monthly podcast over on the Lambcast, the official podcast of the large association of movie blogs, The Lamb, for which I am the shepherd. I do a monthly Lampardy episode, which is movie trivia, Jeopardy inspired, once a month. Bubbawheat, you've been on several times. You haven't done great on the show, but you're always fun to be on there. I always love having you on as a guest. So yeah, look for the Lambcast. I'm on there. And then, as I mentioned, the Lamb, the large association of movie blogs, largeassmovieblogs.com. If you're out there with a movie blog or podcast and want to be part of a large community of like-minded folks, then come join us over at the Lamb. We'd love to have you as a member.
I won't say that it was the Deep Blue Sea podcast itself, because I've never actually seen Deep Blue Sea, so I haven't listened.
That's why you haven't been on as a guest.
But you were the first person to introduce me to the Movies by Minutes community, because I think one time you randomly sent me a message saying that there's this new podcast coming out. It's part of the Movies by Minutes that I've been listening to for a while, and this one is covering the first Sam Raimi Spider-Man, and I think you'd be interested in listening to that. And I did start listening to that, and I listened.
And you were a guest on Toy Story Minute,
yes,
if I recall.
And that was...
Which was a delightful surprise, listening to that. Oh, my friend's on the show.
And that was through the Spider-Man Minutes Facebook group, was where I got the opportunity to guest on Toy Story Minute. And I've listened to them cover all 3 Spider-Man movies. And They were planning on, I think, moving on to Amazing Spider-Man, I think one chapter at a time or 5 minutes at a time. But they haven't gotten around to that. I think they've moved on to other things.
I don't blame them.
Yeah, they weren't as
that makes
excited
sense.
about the Amazing Spider-Man movies as...
Why
yeah.
would they be?
I like the first one, but I hate the second one.
I don't remember the second one and everything. Sorry, I don't remember the first one, and all I remember about the second one is things I didn't like. And Paul Giamatti. I like Paul Giamatti in it.
Long story short, too late. You did. You were the one that I guess introduced me into the Movies by Minute community, which was part of me starting this podcast. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. I'm glad that it did, because it's another great podcast to listen to.
And as always, I am Bubbawheat, and you can find me on Twitter at Bubbawheat. And this podcast, It's Time to Rewind, you can find on Anchor.fm or anywhere else where you listen to podcasts. You can join our Facebook group, It's Time to Rewind, a time loop group. You know, doing this, whatever happens on the next episode, I'm happy now. Because I love you all. Yeah.
I think I'm happy too.
I'm a god. Well, what if there is no tomorrow? I'm a god. There wasn't one today. No matter what happens tomorrow, or for the rest of my life, I'm happy now. Because I love you.
I think I'm happy too.